Apotheosis adds some insanely overpowered gems to Minecraft. And in this video, I'm ranking every single one based on 4 key factors. Number 1 is reliability. How often does the effect activate? If it's inconsistent or has a long cooldown, it ranks lower. Number 2 is power. The stronger its offensive or defensive effects, the higher the rating. 3 is usefulness. Does it work in most situations or is it only good for specific builds? And number 4 is flexibility. How many different gear types can use it and how effective is it in each slot? Furthermore, I'll only be ranking the most powerful versions of each gem in all the mods 10, so that way we are evaluating the gem based on the very best that it has to offer. And obviously this is a tier list, so at the end of the day, it is my opinion. And for some gems, I do ignore the ratings I stated above if I believe the gem has something special to offer. If you agree or disagree, be sure to drop a comment down below telling me why or why not, and of course, be sure to like and subscribe so that I can afford to feed my crippling caffeine addiction. And be sure to stick around to the end of the video to learn about my favorite gem of this entire mod. Alright, I'm Avo, and let's jump in. Alright, first up we have the Frozen Queen gem, and to start out, let's talk about the chest plate. The chest plate grants 5 shields that block 100% of damage, but the 15% activation rate is unreliable, so you can't depend on it when you need it the most. It also has an inconsistent cooldown, making it even harder to tell when it will activate again. If this effect was more reliable, this could be a solid defensive gem, but as it stands right now, it's just too inconsistent. Now for the helmet boosts cold damage by 90%. But unless you're fully committed to a cold build, it won't do much for you. If your weapon already has a cold modifier, this can stack for extra damage, but in most cases, there are better gems to use. Now this is where the Frozen Queen gem actually shines. When placed in a sword, it increases loot drops from mobs killed by cold damage by 225%. If you combine this with knowledge of the ages, you can turn your sword into an XP farming machine. This alone makes the gem worth considering if you can build around it. When talking about the bow effect is underwhelming. It inflicts 1 heart of cold damage over 10 seconds, totaling 5 hearts. The slow damage over time effect just isn't that great, especially when compared to other bow-related gems that offer higher burst damage or utility. So overall, the loot drop bonus on swords is by far the best feature, and the chestplate effect had potential, but its low activation rate ruins it. Everything else is just too situational, so while this gem isn't bad, it's not consistently strong enough to place higher than B tier. Next up, we have a gem of even lower quality than my current microphone setup, the gem of the Twilight Forest. I mean, look at this. Why would you use this? F tier. Moving on. Coming in at number 3 is the Incandescent Inferno. Now when applied to a sword, flaming detonation doesn't seem to actually do anything. I've tested it, and as far as I can tell, it just doesn't seem to work. If I'm missing something or if there's a bug preventing it from functioning, let me know in the comments, but for now I have to consider this part of the video a fail. Moving over to the chestplate, the chestplate effect Berserker's Fury grants strength, resistance, and speed, which sounds great. Early on, this is a strong buff, and it probably stays relevant for a good chunk of the mid-game, but this is all the mods 10, where you eventually become an invincible DPS machine. So while this buff starts strong, it's going to get outclassed in the late game. Moving over to mining tools, applying this gem to mining tools gives +4 efficiency, which is solid for early to mid-game, but once you reach in-game and start insta-mining everything, this effect becomes completely irrelevant. Talking about the helmet, its effect boosts fire damage by 90%, but like the Frozen Queen's gem's cold boost, this is only useful in a fire-based build. If you aren't fully committing to fire damage, this won't do much for you. And overall, the biggest strength of this gem is that all of its effects are consistent. There's no RNG holding it back. Unfortunately, most of the effects fall off hard in late game, and the sword ability straight up doesn't work. It's not bad, but it's also not really impressive. So this has to go in B tier. Moving over to number 4, we have the Gem of the Bloodlord. When applied to a sword or any other light weapon, this gem grants plus 90% lifesteal, which is insanely strong. This is the best lifesteal gem in the entire video, hands down. If you combine this gem with one that boosts attack speed, you'll heal faster than most enemies can actually damage you, making you almost unkillable. Now moving over to the helmet effect looks good at first, with plus 60% attack damage, which is a huge buff, but it also reduces your max HP by 65%, which is just way too much of a trade-off. Losing more than half of your your health makes this almost never worth using. When talking about the chest plate, this one is a lot better, with plus 50% healing received, meaning that food, potions, and any other healing source becomes 50% more effective. If you stack this with lifesteal, you'll be regenerating constantly, making you ridiculously hard to kill. Talking about range stuff here, the bow effect is actually a lot better than I originally thought. Instead of permanently cutting your health in half, you only lose 50% of your max HP when you first fire a bow and have full health. Once you drop to half health or below, the bow doesn't reduce your HP any further, but it also won't increase your damage anymore. This means the bonus damage only applies when you're at full health, so while it's still a risky trade-off, it's not as bad as I initially thought. Moving over to the shield, blocking heals you for 65% of the damage taken, which is completely insane. If you're pairing this with a light weapon, using the lifesteal effect, you might not even need armor anymore, since every hit you take just feeds into your own healing. Overall, if you're looking for a pure lifesteal and sustain gem, this is one of the best. The helmet effect is still garbage and the bow effect has a serious downside, but everything else makes you insanely hard to kill. The lifesteal, extra healing, and damage to health conversion makes this easily an A tier gem. Moving over to number 5, we have the Gem of the Mage Slayer. Avo from the future here, and I wanted to note that originally this gem looked like a beast. With plus 75% protection shred, it sounded like it could shred through enemies with stacked enchanted armor pretty well. But here's the thing. Protection enchantments don't even work on mobs, so that whole benefit is basically useless outside of some PvP, or possibly very specific boss fights in all the mods 10. Combine that with the negative 55% armor shred debuff, and now you're just doing less damage to everything with regular armor. It's a net negative in most combat situations. Moving over to the helmet effect is actually pretty solid. It ignores 35% of magic damage and heals you for the same amount. If you're fighting enemy that constantly spam magic attacks, this could be a lifesaver. That being said, most enemies don't use magic, making this very situational. When talking about the shield, this gem grants resistance 2 for 15 seconds every time you block, but with a 20-second cooldown. This is a strong defensive buff, especially for tanky builds, but the cooldown keeps it from being overpowered. My final thoughts about this gem is it's pretty niche, but it does its job well, and if you're up against magic users or prot stacking enemies, this could be a great counter. However, in most regular fights, its effects just aren't that useful, and the armor shred nerf hurts its overall power. It's a good defensive and anti-magic gem, but not something you'll always want to use. This one has to go
D tier. Straight up disappointing.
Moving over to number 6 is the Endersurge gem. This gem doesn't need much of an explanation, it's just that good. It works on every single armor piece, weapon, and tool, and it simply adds plus 2 levels to all existing enchantments on the item. That means more sharpness, more protection, more fortune, more efficiency, literally more everything. There's zero downsides to this gem, it's purely a buff across the board. Since it applies to any item, there's no need to strategize or optimize, you just put it wherever you want and it instantly makes it stronger. Because of that, this is absolutely our first S tier gem. Moving on to number 7, we have the Gem of the Royal Family, and honestly, I'm not really a huge fan. While it has one decent effect, the rest of the gem is pretty underwhelming, or comes with major downsides. Now let's talk about the helmet, the best part of this gem. It boosts all stats by 15%, which is a nice flat buff with no drawbacks, but it's not game changing, but at least it's useful no matter your build. When talking about pickaxes, this one is just bad. A 40% chance for dropper ore to drop raw gold? Who out here is farming copper for gold? This effect is pointless unless you're in some weird copper economy. Talking about the bow, this effect should be good, but it isn't. You get 40% protection shred, which sounds nice until you realize it also slows your draw speed down by a staggering 65%. Your bow feels awful to use, and since protection shred only affects enchanted enemies, it's simply not worth it. Talking about the shield, this gem grants 50% armor and plus 30% armor toughness, making you significantly tankier. The downside, it also reduces your movement speed by 40%, meaning you'll be incredibly durable but painfully slow. If you can counteract the speed penalty with another gem or by reforging, this could be a viable option, but on its own, the trade-off isn't ideal. And my final thoughts on this gem is it had potential, but only the helmet effect is consistently useful. The pickaxe effect is completely worthless, the bow effect actively nerfs your weapon, and while the shield buff is strong, the speed penalty is brutal. C tier feels right for this. It's not entirely useless, but I wouldn't go out of my way to use it. Now this is a gem I can really get behind. At number 8, we have the Gem of the Earth. It's an all-around powerhouse, boosting damage, defense, and loot gathering with 0 drawbacks. It doesn't work on shield or bows, but for everything else, it's insanely good. Now on light weapons, this gem adds 4 extra levels of sharpness, which is a massive damage boost. Sharpness is already one of the best melee enchantments in the game, so stacking even more on top of that makes the swords and axes hit like a truck. Now talking about core armor, which means chest plates and leggings, if you slot this into either, it adds 4 levels of protection, making you significantly tankier. Whether you're in PvE or PvP, more protection is always a good thing. Moving over to mining tools, here's the real kicker. This gem also grants 4 extra levels of fortune when applied to mining tools. That means more diamonds, more emeralds, more loot from ores, and if you're still gathering resources, this can skyrocket your efficiency. At first, I was debating whether this gem belonged in A tier because fortune becomes less important later in the game. And it doesn't work on shields or bows, but after looking at the raw stats, I think this deserves a high A tier ranking. If it worked on every gear slot, it would easily be S tier, but as it stands, it's still one of the best all-around gems you can get. Moving over to the number 9 spot, we have the Gem of the Warlord. And this gem is an absolute powerhouse. It offers massive buffs to both offense and survivability, making it one of the strongest combat gems in the game. The only reason this isn't an S tier gem is because I'd rather have attack speed over more health, but we'll get into that. Now looking at weapons, when applied to a weapon, this gem boosts critical hit damage by 70%, which is absolutely nuts. If you're running a crit heavy build, this will make your damage skyrocket. Talking about chest plates, slotting this into one gives plus 35% max health, which is a solid survivability boost, but I feel like attack speed would have been a better trade-off. More health makes sense on a chest plate, but I'd rather see something that lets you dish out more damage instead. Moving on over to the helmet, applying this gem to one increases melee damage by 22.5%, which is still a strong boost, but is not as crazy as I initially thought. Now this is one of the better helmet buffs as it affects all melee weapons across the board without requiring any crits or special conditions. Now let's talk about tridents. This one is really unique. When you throw a trident, you gain strength 2 for 10 seconds as soon as it lands, even if it doesn't hit a mob or player. And the best part is that it stacks every 2 seconds up to strength 6. This means if you throw your trident repeatedly, you can quickly ramp up your strength to insane levels, making your melee attacks hit like a truck. Once you reach strength 6, you're going to be destroying anything in your path. This gem is incredible for both offense and survivability. The weapon, helmet, and trident buffs are all top tier, and while the chestplate effect is strong, I still wish it gave attack speed instead. If this gem worked in more gear slots or had just a little more versatility, it would be an easy S tier pick, but as it stands right now, it's still one of the best gems for combat focused builds, making it a high A tier. Coming in at number 10, we have the Tyrannical Gem, and honestly, this one is pretty underwhelming. It has a few decent defensive buffs, but most of the effects feel situational or just simply not that useful. Let's break it down. When applied to a sword or any other light weapon, this gem adds plus 3.5 attack knockback. That's not in percent, that's overall numbers. This might be useful in PvP, but in PvE, knockback is usually more annoying than helpful. It just sends enemies flying away, making fights drag out longer than they need to. When talking about core armor, this gives plus 6 armor toughness, which is solid for reducing armor penetration, but it's not game changing. It's a nice survivability boost, but there are better gems for defense. When slotted into a shield, this gem increases armor toughness by another 50%, making you even tankier. This is a good defensive build, but shields are already strong, so this doesn't feel like a must-have for me. Now moving on over to the boots, this effect seems great at first. You get plus 40% max health, which is solid survivability boost, but here's the catch. If you have a weapon with lifesteal, that lifesteal is 20% less effective. If you're running a build that relies on healing, this can negatively impact your sustain, which hurts more than the extra HP helps. When talking about bows, this gem inflicts bleeding 2 for 8 seconds on hit, and it stacks. This could be useful in longer fights, but bleeding isn't exactly the best status effect. There are just better ways to boost your bow's damage output overall. Now, there's just not a lot going on with this gem. The armor buffs are okay, but the knockback on weapons is annoying. The lifesteal nerf on boots hurts sustain, and the bow effect is just mid. I wouldn't bother using this on a sword or bow, and while the armor effects are fine, they aren't strong enough to carry the gem higher than C tier. Moving over to number 11, we have the Splendor Gem, and this one is a bit of a sleeper pick. It might not seem flashy at first, but once you realize how much extra XP this thing gives, it quickly becomes one of the best gems in the game. Now when applied to any armor piece, this gem grants plus 5 luck. Now luck isn't a game changer, but it can help with better loot drops and some other interactions. It's a nice little bonus, but this isn't what makes the gem amazing. Here's where the Splendor Gem really shines. If you equip it in a weapon or a tool slot, it boosts experience gained by 60%. This is absolutely wild, especially if you're stacking it with other XP boosting methods. Whether you're mining, farming mobs, or just playing normally, you'll be leveling up insanely fast. Now my final thoughts on this is that the XP boost alone makes this gem an easy S tier pick. It might not directly increase your combat power, but more XP means more enchantments, faster leveling, and just overall better progression. Combine this with other XP multipliers and you'll be farming ridiculous amounts of XP in no time. This one has got to go in S tier. Moving on to another strong gem, we have the Solar Gem at number 12. Now statistically, this gem doesn't look all that impressive, but one effect alone carries it straight to S tier for me, and I'll explain why. Now when applied to a sword or any other light weapon, this gem adds plus 8 fire damage. Now this isn't bad, but it's really only useful if you're running a fire-based build. Compared to other gems that boost raw damage or crits, this effect is nothing special. When slotted into core armor, this gem adds plus 104% gravity, which is just bizarre. This means you'll fall much faster, and unless you're somewhere with lower gravity like on the moon, this is more of a nerf than a buff. And here's the real issue. You literally can't jump anymore. That's right, you are fully grounded, making this one of the most impractical armor buffs of the game. And now, the real reason this gem is in S tier. When applied to boots, this gem grants plus 3 to step height, meaning you can walk up 3 block tall surfaces without jumping. If you've ever used step height before, you know how much of a game changer that it is. It makes movement feel so much smoother, eliminates the need to spam jump all the time, and is just an incredible quality of life boost. And if plus 3 step height feels like a bit too much for you, you can always opt for a lesser version of this gem. Now, if this gem didn't have the step height effect, it would be way lower on this list. But because I absolutely love step height and try to get it as soon as possible in any of my playthroughs, I am obligated to put this gem in S tier regardless of what the numbers say. Moving on to number 13, we have the Slipstream gem. And I'll keep this one short because honestly there's not much to say about it. This gem only has one redeeming quality and it isn't even enough to save it. When applied to a bow, this gem grants plus 60% draw speed, which is actually pretty decent. Faster draw speed means faster shots, and in some cases that can be useful for PvP or rapid fire combat. However, it doesn't come with any damage buffs, meaning you're just shooting faster, not harder, which makes it overall a little less valuable. When applied to a pickaxe or any other mining tool, this gem increases mining speed by 45%. That sounds nice early on, but once you get efficiency or better mining gear overall, this buff becomes completely obsolete. The final effect is a max of plus 15% dodge chance on boots. And while dodging sounds great, it's completely RNG based. A 15% chance to avoid an attack is way too unreliable to be something you'd ever want to depend on in combat. This gem isn't completely useless, but it's one of the weakest ones in the game. The bow draw speed is nice but lacks damage buffs. The mining speed boost is temporary at best, and the dodge chance is way too unreliable to matter. Unless you really need that faster bow draw speed, I'd skip this gem entirely. D tier for sure. Alright, coming in at number 14, we have the Gem of the Samurai. And this one is actually a fantastic choice for both melee and ranged builds. It offers great offensive buffs, but it comes with a few drawbacks which keeps it just shy of S tier. When applied to any weapon including swords and bows, this gem grants plus 50% critical hit chance. This is insane for both melee and ranged combat as it lets you land critical hits way more often. If you're using a bow, this pairs perfectly with the helmet effect we'll talk about later, making this gem one of the best options for archers. Now, if it's slotted into leggings or boots, this gem gives plus 35% armor toughness, which is great defensive boost. However, it also reduces movement speed by 15%, which can be annoying. You can counteract this with another gem or speed buffs like I said before, but losing mobility is never ideal. And when applied to a helmet, this gem boosts arrow velocity by 50%, meaning your shots will travel faster and farther. This is fantastic for bow use users as it helps with both damage and accuracy over long distances. If you're using a bow with this gem in both the weapon and helmet slot, you're looking at a deadly range setup. When used in a shield slot, this gem grants plus 10% dodge chance. However, since you're already using a shield to block, a dodge effect is pretty redundant. The low activation chance makes it even less useful, so this is probably the weakest effect of the entire gem. Now overall, this gem actually shares some similarities with the Warlord gem, since both boost crit potential and armor durability. However, instead of increasing crit damage like the Warlord gem, the Samurai gem increases crit chance, meaning you'll land critical hits more often rather than just making them stronger. The Warlord gem is better for raw power, while the Samurai gem is better for speed and consistency. The weapon and helmet buffs make this a fantastic choice for ranged builds, but the speed penalty on armor is a slight downside. Overall, this is an amazing combat gem, making it a solid A tier pick. Coming in at number 15, we have the Lunar Gem, and this one is basically the inverse of the Solar Gem from earlier. Unfortunately, instead of being great, it's just not. While the Solar Gem at least had a top tier quality of life effect, which was the step height, the Lunar Gem is more of a curse than a buff. When applied to a sword or other light weapon, this gem grants plus 8 cold damage. This is identical to the Solar Gem's fire damage, except cold damage is way more niche. Unless you're running a cold based build, this isn't going to be all that helpful. Now here's where the gem goes from bad to straight up dangerous. When you equip this gem in an armor slot and put that armor on, you immediately begin floating away. You don't even have to jump. As soon as you wear the armor, gravity stops working and you start rising into the sky with no way to come back down. You're stuck in the air indefinitely unless you find a way to force yourself back down, which means if you're playing survival and don't have an elytra or some type of teleportation ability, you're basically soft locked. This is by far one of the worst effects in the entire game. When applied to boots, this gem gives plus 80% swim speed, and honestly this is the only semi-useful effect this entire gem has. If you're doing a ton of ocean exploration or living in an underwater base, this could be kind of nice, but for most players it's just way too situational to justify using it. My final thoughts on this one are the only real use case for this gem is if you're exploring or living in an underwater base, but even then there are better movement based gems to use. The cold damage effect is way too niche, and the gravity effect is completely game breaking in the worst possible way. This gem is a death trap, easily D tier. Alright, moving on over to number 16, we have the Lightning Gem. This one is all about speed, and while it doesn't directly increase your damage, it makes everything feel smoother and faster. If you like mobility, this gem is going to be one of your favorites. When applied to a bow, this gem increases arrow velocity by 42.5%. That means your arrows will travel faster, hit harder, and have less drop off over long distances. It's not as strong as the Samurai's gem of 50%, but it's still a really solid buff for ranged combat. If slotted into a pickaxe or other mining tool, this gem boosts mining speed by again another 42.5%. This is a great early game quality of life buff, but similar to the other mining speed gems, it becomes less relevant once you have high level efficiency enchantments or just better gear overall, but it's still a solid boost until then. Now this is where the gem really shines. When applied to leggings or boots, it increases movement speed by 55%, and that's huge. Whether you're dodging attacks, kiting enemies, or just exploring faster, this kind of speed boost makes everything feel better. I value movement speed a lot personally, and because of that, this gem easily earns its spot in A tier. At number 17, we have the Guardian Gem, and this one is all about survivability. If you're the type of player who never backs down from a fight, this gem gives you some solid defensive buffs. However, while it's great early on, it starts to fall off in the late game, which keeps it from ranking higher. When applied to chest plates or leggings, the gem grants plus 8 armor. This is a flat armor boost with no downsides, meaning it's a great defensive option. However, as you progress and get better armor, this effect becomes less impactful compared to other late game tank builds. If applied to a sword or other light weapon, this gem grants plus 30% lifesteal, which sounds great, but it's not as powerful as the Warlord gem from earlier, which grants 90% lifesteal. It's still a nice survivability boost, but there are better options if you want to rely on lifesteal for sustenance. When slotted into a shield, this gem boosts armor by 45% while blocking. This is nice on paper, but shields already provide solid defense, so this effect feels a little redundant. If you're already stacking armor, this won't make a huge difference for you. This gem does a great job at making you tankier, but it lacks the impact of a stronger defensive gem. The armor boost is good early on, but gets outclassed later. The lifesteal is okay, but weaker than the Warlord gem from earlier, and the shield effect is redundant. If this gem had a buff to melee damage or something extra, it could be an A tier gem, but as it stands right now, it's solid but unspectacular, making this gem B tier. Moving on to number 18, we have the Gem of the Combatant. This gem is a must-have for ranged builds, but outside of bows, its other effects are pretty underwhelming, honestly. If you're looking for a flat damage boost to arrows, this gem is one of the best options, but for melee and defense, it doesn't do much. This gem grants plus 55% arrow damage, which is huge for bow users. If you stack this with a gem that increases draw speed or arrow velocity, you can turn your bow into an absolute monster. This is by far the best part of this gem and the main reason you'd want to use it. When applied to core armor, this gem reduces physical damage taken by 27.5%. Now this isn't a bad effect, but it's also not game changing unless you stack it with other defensive buffs. When slotted into a sword or other melee weapon, this gem reduces durability damage by 40%. Honestly, this is pointless in my opinion. If you have mending, or even without mending, durability usually isn't something that you need to optimize. So this just kind of feels like a waste if you use it on melee weapons. Now if you're using a bow, this gem is amazing. There's no denying that plus 55% arrow damage is a massive boost. However, the armor effect is just okay at best, and the melee effect is completely unnecessary. If you're running a melee build, skip this gem entirely, but if you're a dedicated archer, this is a great choice. This gem goes in B tier. At number 19, we have the Breach gem, and this one is all about bypassing armor. If you're dealing with heavily armored enemies or enchanted mobs, this gem can be incredibly useful. However, if your opponents don't have armor or protection enchantments, this gem doesn't really do anything, which makes it pretty situational. When applied to a sword or other light weapon, this gem grants plus 12 armor pierce, meaning it ignores 12 points of enemy armor, and this is great against bosses or heavily armored mobs, but against regular enemies without armor, it doesn't add any extra damage. When applied to a bow, this gem ignores 15 points of protection enchantment on enemies, making it similar for the armor pierce effect for melee weapons. This is a fantastic choice against highly enchanted opponents, but against enemies without protection, it does absolutely nothing once again. If slotted into a pickaxe or other mining tool, this gem increases your block interaction range by 3 blocks. This doesn't boost mining speed or efficiency or anything else, but it's a nice quality of life improvement for building or breaking blocks from a distance. This gem has some very strong effects, but they're very situational. The armor pierce and protection pierce effects are amazing in the right fights, but they're useless against unarmored enemies. The mining range increase is a great convenience feature, but it's not essential. I'd love to see this gem work on more item types, but as it stands, this gem has to go in B tier. At number 20, we have one of my absolute favorites, the Brawler's gem. If you're looking for one of the best offensive and defensive gems in the game, this is it. While I've said before that I don't care much about max health because lifesteal is usually better, this gem makes up for it with a massive attack speed buff, which is really what pushes it into S tier territory. When applied to a sword or other light weapon, this gem increases attack speed by 50%, which is massive. Faster attack speed means more DPS, more consistent hits, and if you're using lifesteal, more healing per second. This effect alone makes this gem top tier for melee builds. If slotted into core armor, this gem increases max health by 12 points, which is equal to 6 hearts. Now while extra health is nice, I still believe lifesteal is a better way to go, and that being said, extra health never hurts, and this definitely makes you a little harder to kill. When applied to shields, again, this gem grants an additional 30% max health, which stacks with the core armor buff, and again, while extra health is nice, I still think more of an offensive buff on shields would have been a little bit better. However, if you're running a tank build, this will make you a little bit harder to take down overall. Even though I usually don't care much about max health, this gem gets a pass because the attack speed buff is just that good. Being able to swing 50% faster means more damage, more procs from lifesteal, and just a better feel overall. The extra health from the core armor and the shield is a nice bonus, but it's the attack speed that really makes this gem shine. S tier. And for our last gem of the video, we have my personal favorite, the Ballast gem. This gem is insanely strong for melee builds, and while it does have a couple of other effects, it's the raw power that makes this gem shine. If you like hitting harder and not getting knocked around, this gem is a must-have. When applied to a sword or other light weapon, this gem grants plus 10 attack damage. That is absurdly strong, making any melee weapon hit significantly harder. This effect scales into the late game, meaning no matter how strong your weapon is, more flat attack damage will always be useful. If used in a mining tool slot, this gem ignores 60% durability damage, meaning your tools last much longer. This is a nice convenience, but again, mending exists, so durability usually isn't an issue, still a decent quality of life perk though. When it comes to core armor, chest plates and leggings, this gem grants 70% knockback resistance, making it much harder for enemies to send you flying. Now this might not sound like a huge deal at first, but if you've ever been launched across the map by a Ravager, a Warden, or an Iron Golem, you know how frustrating knockback can be. And in case that's not enough, let's be real, you don't want to get slapped around like Chris Rock at the Oscars every time you take a hit. This effect keeps you planted firmly in place.
Firmly grasp it!
Making it great for tanking and PvP. This gem is absurdly strong for melee combat, and while the mining tool effect is just okay, the knockback resistance on armor is a great bonus. The attack damage buff alone makes this gem worthy of S tier, because no matter what build you're running, more damage is always good. Absolutely one of the best gems in the game, my personal favorite, gotta be S tier. I'm Avo, like and subscribe, peace.